who would want their monetary policy set in stone and algorithmically,
Who would want to know the
make
future
sure that
I
like that?
really love
yeah.
my money to be trusted. I really
Yes.
like the bank. I'm a really big fan of the bank, but continue.
Yeah, I'm a big
not liking
fan when
any of this.
I'm a big fan when they cut the chicken's head off and they let it run around, and then that indicates how much they'll print the next quarter. Okay.
Yo, and welcome back to another episode of the Nyc and Griff Show. Today is Wednesday, October 23rd at 7:02 a.m. Ripping a little morning podcast. Griff, how you feeling this morning? It's 5 a.m. your time.
Chipper, just dandy, fine. Still, I feel like every morning I can't help but like turn over and get on my phone, and I look at my phone and there's like three things that upset me right out of the gate. So I just like to, I guess, trigger myself to start the day. I really think I should stop looking at my phone though when I wake up in the morning. There's no way that's good for my sight long term. I mean, that's just not low time preference activity there. I don't feel like. I feel like if I wake up, I look at my phone, I'm gonna be blind probably by the end of the day, for the most part. But anywho, how you doing, brother?
Man, I'm doing good. First week back after the honeymoon. Man, going to Jamaica, seeing like real Jamaica was very eye-opening, to say the least. We've got to talk about that a little bit more on the podcast at some point. But Griff, I'm excited to have another guest on today. We talk a lot about kind of the logical side or the philosophical side of Bitcoin. What are all the implications, right? These thought experiments we like to go through. Oftentimes it's difficult to find things to point at to say, oh, see, look at this. This kind of makes it make sense or helps it make sense in a visual sense. And I think our guest is going to help fill some of those gaps in today. So without further ado, welcome to the stage, Wicked Smart Bitcoin. Good morning, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you guys?
Fantastic. Griff, what do you think about Bitcoin as a store of value? When we think about why Bitcoin is a store of value.
My favorite thing about Bitcoin genuinely is the risk-off nature of digital scarcity. Just the fact that I cannot get debased. Not that it's impossible, but fairly impossible. And my second favorite part is self-custody, because there are just far too many examples all over the world. And like you said, you were just in Jamaica. Paper money sucks everywhere. Is that kind of the gist of it, Nick? I mean, like, paper money sucks. There you go. Like, paper money, no good. So I like a lot of the properties of Bitcoin, but self-custody and just the fact that I can't get debased is nice, But where we're going to go with that, I guess we will see. There's a lot of prominent names in Bitcoin that want to kind of pervert what's going on. And I don't know. I mean, I guess that we're all crypto anarchists now. Wicked, did you see that out of Sailor? Do you have any quick comments or thoughts on our guy? A lot of people's hero, I guess, if you would, basically coming after Bitcoiners.
Yeah, there's so many angles of this, and I tweeted about it also, kind of like, I don't know, saying that it was dumb what he was saying. There's a lot of people who are like, he's playing 5D chess, bro. You're just like, okay, cool. Like, if he's playing 5D chess, whatever. Like, maybe I'm just not smart enough to understand it. That's fine.
Yeah,
but
it's funny. It's so true.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, the fact of the matter is, if you're just a regular pleb and you're just saving Bitcoin, you absolutely should not be storing that with a custodian, right? I mean, there's some instances where it might make sense for like a spending balance if it's just, easier to do that, or if you're building up a balance before you have enough to take into self-custody. So there's some instances where it makes sense, but overall, like, your full stack, right, the majority of your savings, you should be saving that in self-custody, or at the very least have, the majority of the control of your keys. Like, if you're in a collaborative custody or something like that, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to trust other people with your Bitcoin, because bad things happen when you do that. Like, time and time again. It's like, how many times we have to learn this the hard way,
I feel like we're going to continue to learn it the hard way. I'm not sure what's next, but the last 3 times Bitcoin has quote unquote crashed, or the dollar price of it has crashed, it's really just exchange getting over leveraged and getting margin called. So yep. I guess it's more like, who's next? I guess I can give Sailor this. I don't think it's 5D chess, but I am in sales. I'm not a politician, but I'm in sales. And sometimes you don't want to just scare away your customers. And if he's selling to large institutions and things of that nature, then sure, he has to put down some Bitcoin fanatics, I guess, if you would. But I just don't see self-custody as like the craziest thing in the world. I just feel like it's one of the most empowering parts about Bitcoin. It's just, it's so important. I mean, like being able to actually have your money and it's not at a bank and you are your own bank. And how many different times, it doesn't happen here in America, but how many times do people have to immigrate to different countries and they can't take their economic power with them? I've been listening to the Fear and Loathing in New Jerusalem, and it's just like how many times people in the Middle East or even Jews themselves have had to leave countries and they've been threatened because they're like, you know what, give us all your stuff and leave, and you're not going to keep any of it. It's like, well, shit, that's not good. I mean, like Bitcoin totally changes that. So I agree. Self-custody is kind of important. Nick?
Yep.
I bet you keep your Bitcoin at a bank, don't you? You better keep it all over.
I'm a big trust. I'm a big trust guy whenever it comes to my money. I like to let other people handle it and control it because it's just way too much for me.
It's too stressful. Okay, I don't want to own my own money. All right, that's just so stressful.
Okay, so I think because Wicked, you've got a killer YouTube channel and you've done a ton on the self-custody side. I have to be honest, I haven't dove into the self-custody side. I've watched a lot of your other visualizations, but somebody might ask, like, okay, well, why is it important to take custody of my Bitcoin? And I think one of the visualizations that you made, or animations, however you want to say it, is the annualized issuance rate of Bitcoin, which gets into the durability, the scarcity, right? The known supply issuance schedule. I would love to hear your thoughts on the supply issuance rate relative to Bitcoin as a store of value.
Sure thing. This is the annualized issuance rate. Okay, what that means is how much Bitcoin's being mined versus how much Bitcoin's being mined a year versus how much there already is mined, right? Overall, it's kind of, you can think of it like the inverse stock to flow, right? So everyone loves the stock to flow, or at least they did last cycle. This is basically that metric, but inverted. Okay, so like as your supply, as your stock of Bitcoin that you've already mined gets larger and larger over time, you would expect the issuance rate to kind of decrease gradually. But then you also get these, events in Bitcoin where you just cut the issuance in half. So you get these kind of really drastic, halvings, right? That's literally what it is. Halving in the inflation rate just overnight, right? Can you see my cursor, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yep. Cool. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, awesome. Yeah. So anyways, so this animation just kind of shows that historically, right, from start to finish. This is the final frame. So I always start with the final frame, but I'll play it forward in a second here. Just to get our bearings. Basically, again, this is the issuance, day to day. So this white line that's kind of jumping all up and over the place. It's not perfect. There's a little variance day to day, right? Some days we might mine, a few blocks less than expected. Some days we might mine a few blocks more. So that's what you're seeing, kind of jumping around here with the white line, right? But the orange line is the target, right? So every day we're targeting mining 144 blocks, right? That'd be 10-minute blocks. If we hit that perfectly on the head, we'd get 144 blocks a day. And at the current block reward, 3.125 Bitcoin, the targeted daily issuance is 450 Bitcoin a day. Okay. So here I have the targeted issuance in kind of gray here. You'll see that this number just stays constant in each epoch, right? And gets cut in half the following epoch. And then here I have kind of the day-to-day target in orange, which again is just this number divided by this number annualized. So this number times 365 divided by this number up here. Okay, and that gives you the targeted annualized issuance rate. All right, so any questions before we start playing this forward?
Just that I really, really like when the old people clan gets together every month at the Fed and gives us our monetary policy, because math as a monetary policy is obviously not a good idea. This is all crazy. I'm excited for you to explain it to me, but this is all so crazy.
Who would want their monetary policy set in stone and algorithmically, like
who would want to know the future?
I really love my money to be trusted. I really like the bank. I'm a really big fan of the bank, but continue.
Yeah, I'm a big fan with I'm a big fan when they cut the chicken's head off and they let it run around, and then that indicates how much they'll print the next quarter. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to play it forward here. All right. So here we're in Epoch 1, right? We just started Bitcoin. And right off the bat, you can see the issuance rate is like crazy, right? It's jumping up and down. There's a crazy spike right there. That was actually when GPU mining turned on. So this is like, a couple of clowns just turned on their GPUs out of nowhere and then mined like, tens of thousands of Bitcoin. By the way, one of those guys was Ted Lasso, the pizza guy.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you knew this, but he was one of the original GPU miners, which is why he had so much Bitcoin to spend on pizza. But yeah, so like just right off the bat, right, you can see the issuance rate is like wild. At first, it's way below the target, so it kind of seems like Bitcoin's not really working great. And then it finally gets up and above the target and starts to kind of, stabilize relative to what it was earlier. So it's starting to look like it's at least working, more or less as intended. You get a couple crazy spikes because you have events like the GPU mining. But overall, right, we're starting to tighten the targets, nice, coming down nice and good, and then the issuance rate is now getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, right? All right, now here we go, boom. That's the first halving, okay? So up until this point, the issuance rate had been tightening and going downwards. Again, it's going down because the total supply is going up, right? And so when you're dividing by a number that's growing, this issuance rate, is falling as a result. What happens here, though, right, on November 28th, 2012, this was the first halving. So this was when Bitcoin hit block height 210,000. And, on that block, programmatically, the issuance rate literally gets cut in half, right? So instead of 50 Bitcoin getting rewarded to miners per block, it gets cut down to 25 Bitcoin per block. And overnight, that issuance rate just literally gets cut in half. So it goes from around 25% annualized issuance rate all the way down to like 12 and a half. Okay. The other thing you'll notice is, it's like we're still kind of chugging along and staying relatively high. The reason why is because this was actually the moment when ASICs got invented and a lot of them started turning on. So overall, the network was actually producing more Bitcoin than it was kind of scheduled to be producing because ASICs were mining so much faster than the 10-minute targeted blocks, right? We were hitting blocks every like 7 to 8 minutes on average for a good like 2 years. So during the second epoch, we're still kind of like finding our feet as a network. Mining is progressing in a lot of different ways with ASICs. And in terms of the issuance rate, we're kind of staying ahead of schedule overall, right? Eventually, even within this epoch, we settle down though, right? We kind of, the difficulty catches up to all the ASICs and we start following that line a little bit more. Epoch 3, another halving, goes from about a little bit over 8 to a little bit over 4% issuance rate now, okay? And, now we're tightening even more around this target. I think at this point, and I'll pause it just right here, so we're in like 2019, coming up on 2020. So a lot of people who are watching this may have kind of come in during that cycle. I feel like, there's a decent amount of plebs who are class of 2020 or 2021. So they kind of understand like this was the moment that they came in. They knew the vibe of Bitcoin, in that time. And I feel like what was starting to happen was this phase shift in what we thought of as Bitcoin. So up until this point, it was peer-to-peer cash. Some people were starting to think of it like sound money or digital gold, but I didn't really think that really, it didn't really take off, I'd say, like in full force until this point, right? Like this 2019, 2020 period. That's when you really started getting that digital gold narrative starting to get pushed. It even started to enter, mainstream media a little bit. So, and the boomers are starting to get on board. Some of the gold bugs are starting to come on over, right? You got like the Larry Lepards and like, all those guys are like starting to finally figure it out, right? And he might have come a little bit earlier than that. But, overall, I feel like this is like the digital gold era, right? What's interesting about this, though, like this specific period, not only are we tightening around this target and we're getting like really, really good at kind of hitting the issuance that we're supposed to be hitting, right? The issuance rate itself is at this point literally, kind of on par with that of gold's, right? So gold, is estimated to have an annualized issuance rate between 2 and 3%. So we're really starting to come up on gold's issuance rate. So when you're just thinking about scarcity of
Hardness of
monetary
money.
assets,
Mhm.
hardness of money or scarcity of monetary assets, and you're just comparing kind of their stock to flow or their annualized issuance rate. This is the moment in time where Bitcoin you know, starts to kind of look like it has that hardness of gold, right?
Yeah, this
Okay,
is
so
this is a
hold
good
forward.
illustration as to exactly why the European Central Bank says that the distribution of Bitcoin is extremely unfair, obviously, because this is so inequitable.
It is, right. I mean, wouldn't it have been nice if the issuance was a little bit, less aggressive and, we gave all the bankers and all the central banks enough time to get on board before all of it was issued to the plebs first?
Yes,
Like
I
that's what
think
they're worried about,
yeah, I mean, like, that would have been so much better for everybody. Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
and if somebody could please make me a sandwich, that would be even better.
It's so funny. Well, also, I think it's interesting too because the Money Mall. I don't know if you listen to Jack Mallers and his dad talk on their podcast at all,
Yep.
but he
Mhm.
always says a third of Bitcoin's probably lost. The other third's held by people who are probably never selling it, and then there's like another third where maybe it gets actively traded or it's kind of around. But even just looking
Mhm.
at this, I'm like, there's probably a lot of people who turn on those GPUs that have no idea where that Bitcoin is anymore. But please continue.
Yeah, probably. Okay, so Epoch 4. This is the last cycle. So, the um, kind of that run up in 2020, after that halving and the China mining ban, which, by the way, you can see in the data. So this drop, where the issuance rate, briefly went below 1%, was actually the time when all of the miners in China shut off their rigs, and as a result, for that day or two, we mined far fewer blocks than what we were targeting, right? So again, the target's 144 blocks a day. During this period of time, we were mining like I think in the 70s or 80s of blocks
Huh.
for a day or two before the difficulty, adjusted, and then we got back on track. Okay.
Could you give us a quick like explanation of so whenever China bans mining and they turn all those miners off, why
Yeah.
is it that the network produces less Bitcoin per day? Could you give us a quick thought on that?
Yeah, so there's a really important aspect of Bitcoin called the difficulty. And sometimes, you just say like the difficulty adjustment. But basically, the difficulty, it it tells you how difficult it is to mine Bitcoin. At first, it started at one. Nowadays, it's all the way up to like 90 trillion, meaning it's literally 90 trillion times more difficult to mine Bitcoin. And that difficulty gets adjusted every 2016 blocks. Okay. So if half your miners drop off the network during one of these 2016 block periods, during that time, it remains as difficult as it was when all of them were on the network, right? Until you've mined all 2016 blocks in that period, it remains that difficult. And so if half your miners drop off the network, you're going to start producing half the amount of blocks as you would have otherwise with all of them on the network, right? Until you've finished that difficulty period of 2016 blocks. And then at that point, if on average those blocks came in at a higher period of time than 10 minutes on average, then the difficulty gets lowered. So
Mhm.
then the next 2016 blocks, it becomes easier for the miners who've remained on the network to mine 10-minute blocks again, right? We're always targeting 10-minute blocks, and we have this kind of self-correcting automated difficulty adjustment that makes sure that we're always staying on target, right? Even if we add a bunch of miners, then it gets more difficult so that we still get roughly 10-minute blocks. If a bunch of miners drop off, then it gets less difficult, so that we keep on that 10-minute block target.
Which is
But
exactly what's shown there in the data, right? That the China
Right.
mining ban happens, it dips down below that issuance target, and then we difficulty adjusts, and then bang, it pops right back up, right to where you're saying, and it continues on like that. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Yep.
Well, even to further it, I just want to say to all the crazy ones, because there are our podcast, I want to say we get a fair bit of Bitcoin listeners, but we also get a fair bit of just like normies that kind of tap in a little bit. And number one thing, like the only thing that people have against Bitcoin, they're like, well, what if an EMP is launched in Europe and the United States and whatever? I think this explains it perfectly. Like, there would be a lot of miners that no longer can mine for a certain period of time. It would drop off, but the difficulty adjustment would probably come in and correct that. And so as long as there is at least one computer or one person mining it somewhere in the world, it's going to figure itself out, because the difficulty adjustment, would you say the difficulty adjustment is just as important, or if not more important, than the engineered scarcity of Bitcoin as well? I mean, like it goes hand in hand a little bit.
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand. And you need the difficulty adjustment in order to enforce the scarcity, because without, well, I should say the scarcity and the issuance rate, right? Because without the difficulty adjustment, what you would have had is you would have had all the GPU miners mining all the Bitcoin, right? Like they literally would have mined all 21 million in the first like 2 years, but because we have the difficulty adjustment, it ensures that even if hash rate, 1 million X's, then the difficulty 1 million X's, right? And so you can't game the system. You can't dig for more Bitcoin than is available, right? So it'd be akin to like, it's like if some ruler in the sky said, you can only mine like 1 ton of gold a day, or 1 ton of gold a year, and then we reach like a comet that has a bunch of gold, but then for whatever reason we're not able to mine it. Like it's like it's set in stone. You can't game it. Maybe for a brief period of 2016 blocks, you can kind of like throw a bunch of hash rate at that and get those ones quicker, but then the next 2016 blocks it will get harder. So it always kind of evens out and self-corrects itself.
Even if the United States goes, you know what, we should make energy efficient, we should use Bitcoin mining for pretty much every energy source we have, doesn't really matter to Bitcoin, they can come compete for it, but it's not going to change anything about the network whatsoever.
No, I mean, what it would change is it would just make the network more resilient, right? You'd have more distributed hash rate. You'd have more energy being put into Bitcoin's proof of work, thereby making, the network more secure. So, I mean, like the game theory is such that you kind of like, you don't want to attack it. You just want to join it, right? I mean, Bitcoin, as we're learning over time, like Bitcoin's super valuable. People continue to value it at an ever increasing rate. And as a result, more and more people want to mine it, which leads to a higher hash rate, which leads to more security, which then makes the network, more valuable.
Oh yeah.
More people want to mine it, right? So it's this vicious cycle that just goes, on and on and on. And I think ultimately where it ends is all value is ascribed to Bitcoin. An immense amount of the energy that humans produce and capture is thrown at securing the network because we all value it at a certain point. And it kind of just becomes the money that we all think of and use.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
Well, it's also like one of those things where we all wait for these bull runs in Bitcoin. And it's clear to me that it's just like, miners and how you value it with the halving and the difficulty adjustment. Like this is also why Bitcoin goes up really fast. And it's also, in a sense, in my opinion, why people also get margin called a lot, because it's fixed. Yep. It's like you can play all the games you want and bless. I mean, like if you guys need a yield on your Bitcoin, go ahead. But I think it's a little bit risky. I mean, it's risky because there is no bailout here. It is just going to keep going. I mean, it's not going to stop clearly, but this is so interesting. I send all your videos to all my friends and it goes way over everybody's head, but eventually it won't. Eventually it won't go over everybody's head. Everybody's gonna be like, oh my goodness, like this is crazy. People were figuring this out way before I even thought of it, but it is
that's the hope, right? Hopefully they'll just click one day. And I think having the visual aid can be really helpful to a lot of people. Like I'm a visual learner. and I can watch and listen to all the podcasts in the world, and until I get that right, animation or chart or visual cue, like it won't click, right? And so
Mhm.
I make these primarily for myself. If I'm being honest, like I want to understand the data as well as I can. And then, I'm glad that other people enjoy them as well and learn from them because, yeah, it's been fun kind of making these and posting them.
Oh, they definitely are. We've been following you, I feel like, from the very beginning, and you came on the Twitter scene hot, or the X scene, whatever you want to call it. I like Twitter still. But I mean, you've been posting amazing content since you got here for the most part. Have you been in Bitcoin longer than you've been posting some of these graphics, or did it really like kind of take you building some of these things for you to even see it, to start getting into the network a little more?
I have, yeah. So I mean, I didn't fully get orange pilled until about, I'd say about right here. So like, maybe early 2020. Right
Yeah.
before this halving, is kind of when I was like, this Bitcoin thing, like it's still going, right? It survived this bear market. Um, it's pretty interesting. And in my mind, I was like, okay, we're gonna, I started learning about it, and I was like, okay, we're gonna get another halving. If we get another bull run after that halving, then like it's over, right? I mean, that's like at a certain point, you just have to admit that like, okay, this thing's going on forever, right? 3 for 3, like you get 3 halvings, you get 3 bull runs. I mean, nothing else has ever done anything like that ever, right? In the history of all, you know, monetary assets, investments, whatever you want to call it.
True.
So for that to happen was crazy, right? And then it did happen. So then I was like, okay, yep, orange pilled.
I'm
All my
in.
money is now Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Everything I do is to acquire more Bitcoin, right? Just stack as much as I can, and in my mind, I was like, I am running out of time, right? Like, I had known about Bitcoin for a long time. I used it very early on, in a period where, it was, thought to be used only by criminals and whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and uh, and at that time, it was just like it was just a tool to use because you couldn't buy drugs online any other way. So like,
Yeah.
like it was just a tool to use, but I didn't really think about it as sound money, right? It was just e-cash.
Mhm. It's
And
figured out
yeah,
so many problems. There's so many problems with money. There have always been so many problems with money. It's so interesting
yeah,
to me that there's so many. I saw you ask about this. Like, was there people talking about a difficulty adjustment before Bitcoin? Because we've had a couple people on that kind of gave us the history of proof of work as well, and basically that was a
yeah,
fix for
yeah.
spam on email. I don't know if you got an answer to that. Was there somebody who kind of came up with a
Yes.
difficulty adjustment?
So there was a lot of like no one came up with it the way that Satoshi did, so kind
Yeah.
of in a self-correcting automated way. But I think Adam Back was saying that B Money had is B Money Nick Szabo's? I forget whose that one is,
Yeah.
but one of the precursors to Bitcoin, one of those earlier
Uh huh.
cryptos. Basically, like that one had a human based difficulty adjustment where like I guess the central issuer, right? Because a lot of these crypto systems had like centralized authorities who would issue the cryptocurrency, and that's the reason why they didn't work. But anyways, that issuer would adjust, the difficulty of how hard it was to like issue more cryptocurrency for that system. So it
Yeah.
wasn't like a self-correcting automated difficulty adjustment, but it was kind of the precursor idea to maybe what led Satoshi to come up with this one, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you're me and Nick have had a little bit of a debate about this, but Satoshi invented Bitcoin. He invented Bitcoin. But there are a couple things there after the invention that I think are more in the discovery category. I think that
Hmm.
a couple of these things might fit that. Where are you on that stance? I mean, like he invented Bitcoin and then a couple of things got discovered, or is it all just I guess an invention? I mean, it's kind of stupid semantics, but it's
Yeah,
interesting.
I think it's a bit of a semantical argument or just
Yeah,
topic conversation because
we're bored.
because I think both. I mean, both can be true, right? And they kind of can mean the same things too, depending on what you're arguing. I think that a lot of the ideas that he came up with, or that he just put together, right, was, yeah, I mean, you could argue it's an invention because he put these together in an engineered system, that he literally built, right, and invented, and then put out into the world, and it took off. Uh, Conversely, right, it could be a discovery. You could argue it as a discovery because maybe somewhere else in the universe, someone else put together these pieces, right, and
Right.
created their own sound money, right? Maybe there's like a, a Bitcoin that another alien civilization has come up with, and it has a lot of the same properties because they also were discovered in similar ways.
Fair
So in
enough.
that sense, like, I um, I think Bitcoin is unique to the human experience because it is the first instance of a digitally scarce peer-to-peer sound money, right,
Yeah.
in a
Yep.
decentralized system. But I wouldn't be surprised if other intelligent civilizations have discovered similar digitally scarce sound monies on their own, right? Especially if they're still around, right? If they've if they've survived
Sounds like a hot
millions
take.
of years,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah. Satoshi
So
is
in
an
that
alien?
sense, I'd
Question
say,
mark. Is that where we're at with it?
well, I don't know. I see. I think like whenever humans invent or discover really profound or kind of uh, highly important things, I like to acknowledge the fact that they're humans because I think that that lifts us all up. It makes us like as a species, you're like, holy shit, like we are capable of so much, right? So in my mind, Satoshi is a human. I mean, he's a obviously a very smart human. But just like other humans, like Einstein, or like these other like wicked smart humans who who are come up with a bunch of crazy shit that progresses civilization. Um, Satoshi's just another one of those kind of greats that uh, came up with something that it will become and is very important for the progression of civilization, and to get us to kind of like that next level.
Yeah, progress us in a way where technology is deflationary, but we don't have a money that meets that. I mean, and we never have. We have been under
Yeah,
the guise of basically what was like a child brothel, whatever you want to call him, Robert Keynes. I don't know where he really comes from or where the whole like we need to print money to grow thing, where that actually ever made sense to anybody. But it's so interesting how we live in this digital age with all this technology coming out, and we have a currency that or a money that just like it really just doesn't match up. It doesn't make any sense. Bitcoin is the solution to a lot of those things. I mean, just based straight off the chart that you're giving us, it has solved monetary issuance. It has solved people sitting and like having these IMF World Bank meetings and people talking about what we need to do with the money. It's like we need a money where we can't do anything to it, but that's just my
mhm,
take. I mean, like we need a money that is trustless in that way. It's
yeah,
just like a funny thing to say to people because it's such a paradigm shift. And then to your point, I don't know how you feel about this, but we get blessed with these amazing really freedom technologies, whether it's the printing press or the constitution or Bitcoin. We
mhm,
always mess them up. We just
mhm.
love messing great things up. I don't know if we can even mess up Bitcoin, which might make it better than everything else. But do you think that we have a chance to mess this thing up, given how great it is?
There's always a chance to mess things up. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I think if enough Bitcoin gets in the hands of people who don't appreciate its fundamental properties, and what makes it so great,
yeah,
then we could run into some big issues, right? Obviously, Bitcoin, it's not a proof of stake system, so it's not like having more Bitcoin gives you an outsized vote in consensus changes, but it does give you an outsized influence in what those changes might be in the future, right? I mean, everyone can run whatever version of Bitcoin they want on their own node, but if you have Coinbase and BlackRock and Sailor and and Morgan Chase and like all these banks who are about to get into it, and they've got a significant amount of Bitcoin and influence over the network, and then
yeah,
they decide, hey, you know what would be great? It'd be great if we gave Bitcoin just a little bit of extra inflation, right? Because everyone knows that money doesn't really work unless you have 1%, probably closer to 2% target inflation. So we should probably just give it some tail emission 2% inflation for all of time. We're going to fork the network. We're going to make this Bitcoin that will definitely last longer. It's going to pay the miners more, so they're going to be incentivized to join our network. And because we have Coinbase and all these other exchanges in our back pocket, we're going to make it so that they list this new Bitcoin as BTC, and the Bitcoin you all love, you plebs, that's going to be called Bitcoin Classic now. Okay.
Yep.
And we're also going to outlaw that
Yep.
Bitcoin Classic. I mean, there's these really dark paths we can go down.
Absolutely.
But to get there, right, for that to become, a reality in any sense, first they have to get their hands on a shit ton of Bitcoin. And luckily for us, and because of this ingenious issuance curve that Satoshi, started Bitcoin with, where most of it, almost all of it, got issued before, these morally corrupt, greedy motherfuckers got into it, right?
Yep.
Because of that, most of the Bitcoin is in the hands of the plebs. So we really have the power here, and as long as we don't fuck it up, and as long as we don't, send all of our Bitcoin to the trusted, too big to fail banks, then I think we'll be all right.
Yeah, I agree.
So hopefully, kind of over time, Bitcoin will continue to get distributed amongst more and more individuals. And even if it starts ending up in the treasuries of institutions, the hope is that at least it kind of goes into a wide array of these institutions all around the world in different jurisdictions. And like that in itself may also kind of lend to the decentralization of the network and the resilience of, there being any kind of fuckery that goes around with these cabals of, larger like banking institutions, right?
Yeah, just awful people. I mean, like, I think it's kind of funny because some people are all like, there's so many Bitcoin podcasts, there's whatever, this, that, and the other thing. And I think that I'll speak for Nick and I, we do not care. We do not care what Michael Saylor thinks. We do not care what banks think. We do not care what JP thinks. We don't care what the Rothschilds think. Come get my Bitcoin. And we're like, what are you going to do? Kill me? I mean, at the end of the day, if there's enough people promoting the self-custody aspect of Bitcoin against the people who think that, oh, we're all crypto anarchists or whatever even that means. I mean, I'm so tired of even the word crypto. It just doesn't even it's just like a fad that is dying. Like, I still have people that are like, ooh, this altcoin's going to go up. Like, I know Bitcoin's great, but I'm going to get this altcoin. It's going to 1,000x. And I'm like, so we all know these are just like little gambling Ponzi schemes now. Okay, that's fine. I mean, at least we're not like back when I first got into it, the Ethereum had like a proof of work network that didn't really work. And then they went Ethereum 2.0, which really was just like waving the white flag or actually trying to compete with Bitcoin in any way, shape, or form. But self-custody is just, it's so important. I mean, if there is no self-custody, if there aren't people that believe in holding their own money, then the banks have a much better shot at doing the things that you're kind of talking about, in my opinion. The greedy motherfuckers have a chance to kind of centralize not only the mining, but I mean, just all the Bitcoin. And eventually in 100 years or whenever Bitcoin runs out, they might have an opportunity to change the consensus of the network. Might is, I think, a big word there, because there's also going to be a lot of people like myself who are going to hold this thing to the end, then are going to teach my kids about Bitcoin, and they're going to hold it to the end. And they're only going to use it to purchase things that they need. But I mean, there's just
so that's an interesting topic here. So if the common path that a good takes to becoming a money is to first be a collectible, then a store of value, then medium of exchange, then unit of account. I forget who that came from or what source that is, but I think it's a pretty good framework, right? We know we're past the point of Bitcoin just being a collectible, but we're definitely not. I mean, there's a handful of actors that are operating with Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, but would you say, Wicked, that we're kind of in that adoption phase of Bitcoin as a store of value as people are coming to understand Bitcoin? Would you say that that's kind of where we're at? And then, it's so interesting to kind of speculate on what the future could look like in terms of medium of exchange and unit of account. But what do you think about the adoption phase?
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I mean, everyone kind of uses it in whatever way suits them best, right? What are you showing there, Griff?
I'm showing my tulip price. Bitcoin's just tulips, guys. Okay, it's all gonna crash. It's all gonna go. I keep this
Yeah,
in
right.
my office for when people come over and they're like, "What is that? Like some like cool chart or something?" I'm like, "No, you wouldn't get it. You know, it's just like I like flower money. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just love. I
Yeah.
love that.
Remember when everyone used tulips as their store of value?
It's just funny
How
because
did that
people
work
don't
out
have
for
any
them?
money at all. Yeah, it's crazy.
No, but it's yeah. I think we're kind of solidly in the adoption of Bitcoin as a store of value. I mean, we're seeing that by people just kind of they're putting in the retirement accounts now, even if it's like in an ETF form. Like everyone's kind of like just buying it up and trying to hold it as long as possible at this point. There's, I think, pockets of individuals or communities who are trying to use it as a medium of exchange. And I think that that's great. Like whenever I get the chance to spend Bitcoin, I try to, jump on that opportunity. I think it's nice spending it. I'd rather spend Bitcoin, not be, financially surveilled. Um, know that my payment went through. Know that the person I'm spending to didn't have to, take a haircut from a credit card fee. It's just a better experience, I think, spending with Bitcoin on both sides. It just feels nicer. And also just, sending around little pieces of Bitcoin is like, it's pretty dope, right? If you're using the Lightning Network or whatever, like, just having that instant gratification of like, yep, boom, just sent you whatever, 5,000 sats. Thanks.
Well, and
Pretty
it's
awesome.
not like Bitcoin couldn't be. I mean, it's not like I have Fold. I mean, I have a lot of great use cases for Bitcoin where if I wanted to use my Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, no, it's not going to be perfect right now, but you definitely could. I think it's more the regulatory framework which we live in with taxes and things like that. Unbeknownst to Sailor, there are a lot of Bitcoiners who aren't just like crazy, like we can't pay our taxes or we don't want the IRS up our ass. Like that's not what I want. I'm not looking for that, but I would like to be able to. I live in America. I would be able to like to communicate my economic value with people. And I do deem Bitcoin to be more of like a First Amendment type of technology where it's like, this is just communication. So I don't really know if the taxes are going to stick around. And I don't know what you think about this because I know Lightning adoption is going pretty darn well actually in El Salvador. I think Bitcoin would be used as a medium of exchange a lot faster than people think if there was.
Well, it also seems like the infrastructure we use today for, I mean, any kind of point of sale service, like it seems like it's just a matter of updating and uploading new software, and it seems like it's all pretty much already compatible. I mean,
Yes, I think so.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
People are paying with QR codes on traditional financial rails, so it's
right
like
there.
It's already there.
Yep, I tend to agree. If you watch the BlackBerry movie, when it's kind of like they had to figure out how like you get more throughput or like there are just, discoveries within it, there's going to be a lot of, I don't know what you think about this, Wicked, but there's going to be a lot of discoveries still within Bitcoin that do not change the network, but do enhance it. It's kind of like, oh, there's no smart contracts on Bitcoin. It's like, well, not every Bitcoiner likes it, but boop, there you go. There's a smart contract. It's like, oh, there's not NFTs or like fake monkeys on Bitcoin, but like, it's like, I guess if you want it, like here you go. Like somebody will probably figure it out. But Bitcoin is one of those things where we're not at the end of this thing. I mean, like there's a lot of innovation to go, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially as it gets, as it relates to medium of exchange, there's tons of innovation left to happen. I think what we're scratching the surface with currently is medium of exchange, but with, different trust trade-offs, right? So like most people are using medium of exchange through a custodian, or, maybe on like a side chain like Liquid. And so like there's these different trust trade-offs that you have to take in order to have an easy UX, smooth medium of exchange experience. But under the hood, you're still passing around sats, right? You're passing around Satoshi value. Overall, I mean, those custodians are moving the sats on your behalf. So, that's like the current kind of state that we're in. And if you want, I mean, here's the nice thing about it. If you really value self-custody, then you can fucking figure it out, right? Run your own Lightning node, manage your own channels. Like, it's possible. You can do this whole thing trustlessly if it's really important to you. So that's the nice thing, right? You have the options to do it one way or the other. If you want the ease of use and you don't want to deal with the headache of running a Lightning node, fine. Use a custodian for some spending change. Not a big deal. If you really value self-custody, then fucking figure it out and like run your Lightning node, manage your channels, whatever. Like, do that, and then you can have the whole trustless experience, the way that you think it's supposed to be. Now, what's going to be really interesting is in the future when we do get kind of more advanced, kind of crazier second layers, where those trust assumptions get even more, I'd say, like stretched, right? So think like ideas like ARC, I think are really interesting, because now you would have a system where it's trustless. You can unilaterally exit just like you can while you're running a Lightning node, right? Like if you don't want to be with your Lightning partner and you want to close your channel, you can do that. You don't need their permission to close it and get your sats back on chain. With something like ARC, it'd be a similar type of setup where you can go in the ARC, and while you're in there, you can move around your sats super easily, low fees, privately, right? All that. It'd be connected into the Lightning, so you can receive and pay Lightning invoices from the ARC, all of that. And then if you want, you can unilaterally exit from it in the same way that you can with a Lightning channel. Now, of course, you would be incentivized to cooperate with the ARC, and the ARC would be incentivized to cooperate with you. So you probably wouldn't have to unilaterally exit, but that option's there if you needed it. So I think there's a lot of these kind of like, we're starting to stretch, these ideas. I wouldn't say to their limits, but stretch them even more, right? And we're getting more and more flavors of second layers and options when it comes to how we can use our Bitcoin, especially as a medium of exchange. I think that is super important to, to explore all the possibilities. So yeah,
And it
future's
probably makes
bright,
the
man.
value of Bitcoin go up. Probably makes the value of
for
Bitcoin
sure.
go up. You're definitely going to
For
have
sure.
some really rich people who want to go, hey, give me a little bit of that Bitcoin. I'll give you like an 8% yield plus 2% on the S&P or whatever the math that guy likes to put out there. It's like, if you just give me your Bitcoin, I'll give you a yield on it. And like I've said it on this podcast, I'm probably not doing that, but kind of like you're saying, there's going to be options for Bitcoiners moving forward. Like, where do you want to go with it? And it's totally up to you. I mean, like, nobody can tell you anything. I mean, it's your money, it's your decision, it's your choice. I would be careful, but some people are definitely going to trust some of these big institutions. They're going to take a stable coin, or they're going to take some crappy money for their Bitcoin probably in the future. But it's also nice to see that there's innovation on the medium of exchange side, where it's like, I don't know if we actually need the whole yield thing, but you guys go crazy. Go ahead.
I think the conclusion here that we come to, though, is Bitcoin is just hard as fuck. Bitcoin really is just the hardest fucking form of money we've ever had. Wicked, I wish we had more time this morning, but we've got it up here on the screen. For those listening that enjoyed what Wicked had to say today, go see him on Twitter at W_S_Bitcoin and his Wicked Smart Bitcoin YouTube channel. But where else are those the two main places where we should direct people to find your work?
Yeah. Those are the two places I'm usually posting. On Twitter, if you reply to my stuff, I'll try to get back to you. You can DM me if you have any specific questions. I try to run some of these like self-custody Q&A spaces every once in a while in the mornings on Twitter. So you can catch me there too if you want to jump up on stage and ask a question, in person. A lot of people kind of benefit from that learning style as well.
He's easily one of the best X accounts on Bitcoin Twitter. I mean, like, if not in my opinion, like the best. We used to have like the Joke and Sorties on here of the world. So like we've had a few people on here that kind of blow up there after the fact. And I tell you, like, you are easily probably my favorite Bitcoin account, because he does a lot of the graphics and everything that are just really cool, but he actually gives his opinion and he replies to everybody, which is just like, it's super fun. Like his whole Twitter account is like, just, there's not a lot of people doing it like him. So you got to follow him. You got to get on some of the graphics. It's so much fun to follow. And there's not a lot of people that actually do reply like that want to kind of like explain it and whatnot. But I just love it. I love it for Bitcoin,
Yeah.
but also
we need to have you on for another conversation where we don't have any time limits, because we could have a great conversation, I think, over a couple or 3 or 4 hours.
we didn't even get into
Yeah,
UTXO
definitely.
management, which is basically
Yeah, we
this
didn't
is
even
like
get
the
into that,
UTXO management key.
That's a
Like,
whole
this is
nother
the guy.
conversation on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Cannot wait to
I
get
can
into
go
those
off on that
things
one.
later on, sir. But thank you for coming on the show. Excited for another one.
Yep. And keep your eye out for, I was going to share that animation about the difficulty adjustment and proof of work. I'll post that on X soon and on YouTube. So keep your eye out for that one. And maybe I'll come back on to explain it at some point.
Beautiful. We're looking forward to it. Griff, man, what another good conversation. I think those visuals are really good. I mean, the supply issuance, right? That really sheds light on Bitcoin's store value argument. I mean, it's just, I think the visualizations are really good.
No, I just love it. It's 5:54 a.m. over here. I know you guys probably have more of a life to get to due to time zones and things like that. We didn't even get to Bitcoin and time and how time is super stupid. But yeah, I mean, like, Wicked is he's awesome. He's awesome for coming on here. But I've followed his stuff since he had like a couple thousand followers, and now I think he has like in the tens of thousands of followers. And in my opinion, it's only going to grow as people want to get into Bitcoin. He provides some of the best, if not the best, visuals for these things that we're talking about. And kind of like you said, some people are audio learners. Some people learn through conversation, which is why Nick and I really do this podcast. That's really for us. We're just trying to like steal information from really smart people. Or there's visual learners. And I think he puts it out there for the people who learn visually so well. And it's fantastic. It's fantastic for Bitcoin, but it's also fantastic for education and financial literacy and just like how money is changing. You know, money is changing. Bitcoin is the change, and we need people like him to kind of help people understand that a little bit. And he does a great job. So yeah, I really do hope we get him back on, because he has a whole host of topics that I don't want to say they're controversial, but he's got some great UTXO management takes that do seem to upset some people, which I think is great. And that's exactly why we need to have him back on, so we can keep going, keep riffing. But he's probably going to be huge by the next time we try to get him on. So I'm probably going to have to wake up at 4 a.m. to get that conversation in. And I'm more than willing.
Hey, if you guys are not watching video, we do have video on Spotify and YouTube. We like to interact with people. We like to talk and have conversations. We like to do that on X and or Twitter. I still like to say Twitter too, Griff. You can find all of our links at nycandgriffshow.com. It's all spelled out NYCandgriffshow.com. Peace.